The baby started crying before she even reached the table. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The soft clinking of coffee cups and quiet midday chatter in the sunlit cafe seemed to dissolve into a single moment of tension as everyone noticed her, standing there, slightly breathless, holding a baby against her chest like both a shield and a confession. And across the table, waiting for her, sat a man who had already been through more than his fair share of heartbreak. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the unexpected ways life can surprise us, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Echoes the Stories. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them. Armin had chosen the corner table deliberately, where sunlight filtered softly through tall glass windows, casting gentle patterns on the wooden floor. It was his first date in nearly 3 years. Not because he hadn't tried, but because something inside him always hesitated at the last moment, pulling him back into the quiet, predictable world he had built for himself and his daughter. He checked his watch again, more out of habit than impatience. The woman he was meeting, Syra, had seemed different during their conversations, honest, a little guarded, but warm in a way that felt real. Still, experience had taught him not to expect too much. He didn't expect this. Syra approached slowly, her eyes scanning the cafe until they landed on him. There was a flicker of hesitation in her expression, the kind that suggested she had considered turning back at least twice before stepping inside. The baby in her arms let out another soft cry, and she adjusted the small blanket around him with practiced care. Armin stood up instinctively, confusion flashing across his face before he masked it with a polite smile. He had imagined many versions of this moment, but none of them included a child. She reached the table and stopped, her grip tightening slightly around the baby. For a second, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward in the usual sense, it was heavier, filled with unspoken explanations and questions waiting to surface. Syra finally exhaled, her voice steady but quiet, as though she had rehearsed this moment countless times. She explained that she hadn't planned for this, that her babysitter had cancelled at the last minute, that she almost didn't come at all. There was something in her eyes, though, something deeper than inconvenience. It was fear, but also defiance. The kind of look that said she was tired of hiding parts of her life to fit into someone else's expectations. Armin listened without interrupting, his gaze shifting briefly to the baby, who had calmed now, blinking curiously at the unfamiliar surroundings. A small hand peeked out from the blanket, gripping the air as if trying to hold on to something invisible. For a moment, the past rushed back to him in a way he hadn't expected. 3 years ago, Armin had stood in a hospital room holding his own newborn daughter, Zara, while the world he knew collapsed around him. His wife had passed away during childbirth, leaving him with a grief so vast it felt like it would swallow him whole. The early days had been a blur of sleepless nights, silent tears, and the overwhelming responsibility of raising a child alone. He had learned everything from scratch: how to soothe a crying baby at 2 a.m., how to braid tiny strands of hair before school, how to smile even when his heart felt unbearably heavy. Over time, the pain softened, but it never truly left. It simply became part of him. And now, sitting across from Syra, watching her hold her child with a mixture of strength and vulnerability, something inside him shifted. Instead of disappointment, instead of the quiet retreat he might have chosen in the past, Armin did something completely unexpected. He smiled, not politely, not out of obligation, but genuinely, and gently pulled out the chair for her. The tension in Syra's shoulders didn't disappear entirely, but it eased just enough for her to sit down. She adjusted the baby carefully, her movements instinctive and protective, as though she had spent countless hours navigating moments like this alone. The conversation started slowly, like two people stepping onto uncertain ground. There were pauses, small hesitations, and moments where words felt insufficient. But gradually, something warmer began to take shape. Armin asked about the baby, not with curiosity tinged by judgment, but with a quiet understanding that surprised even himself. Syra spoke about her son, Ayan, her voice softening as she described his restless nights and sudden bursts of laughter that made everything else seem worth it. She didn't share everything all at once. The story of how she became a single mother unfolded in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to complete in front of someone she had just met. But what she did reveal carried enough weight to be felt. There had been promises, once. Plans that seemed certain. And then, gradually, those promises had unraveled, leaving her to rebuild her life on her own terms. She had faced judgment, whispers, and the quiet isolation that comes from not fitting into the neat expectations of others. Through it all, Ayaan had been her anchor. Armin listened, not offering solutions, not trying to fix anything, but simply being present. It was a kind of presence that had been rare in her life, steady, unintrusive, and real. At some point, Ayaan started fussing again, his small face scrunching as he prepared to cry. Saira shifted in her seat, clearly used to handling it, but before she could fully react, Armin leaned forward slightly. There was a moment of hesitation, a silent question hanging in the air. Then, gently, he asked if he could help. Saira blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't something she had expected, not from a first date, not from someone who had every reason to feel overwhelmed by the situation. But something in his tone reassured her. She nodded. Armin reached out carefully, lifting Ayaan with a familiarity that immediately revealed his experience. He adjusted the baby instinctively, holding him close and rocking him slightly. The movement was natural, almost effortless, as though his body remembered what his mind had tried to bury under years of routine. Ayaan's cries softened, then stopped altogether. Saira watched, her eyes widening slightly. It wasn't just that he knew what he was doing, it was the way he did it. There was patience in his touch, a quiet gentleness that spoke of something deeper than skill. For the first time since she walked into the cafe, she allowed herself to relax. Time seemed to move differently after that. The cafe noise returned, blending into the background as their conversation deepened. They spoke about their lives, not just the struggles, but the small victories that often went unnoticed. Armin shared stories about Zara, about the way she insisted on wearing mismatched shoes and how she believed every stray cat in the neighborhood was secretly her responsibility. Saira laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that caught her by surprise. It had been a long time since something felt this easy. Outside, the afternoon sun stretched across the streets, painting everything in warm, golden light. Inside, two people who had almost given up on the idea of something new found themselves sitting across from each other, no longer strangers in the way they had been an hour ago. But the real turning point came when Saira asked him a question she hadn't planned to ask. Why didn't he leave? She didn't say it bluntly, but the meaning was clear. Most people would have. Most people already had, in different ways, when they realized her life came with complications they weren't prepared to accept. Armin didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ayaan, now peacefully resting against his shoulder, and then back at Saira. When he finally spoke, his words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he had experienced. He told her that life rarely goes according to plan. That sometimes, the things we think will break us end up reshaping us into something stronger. And that meeting someone who understands that kind of journey is rare. He didn't see her situation as something to walk away from. He saw it as something to respect. Saira felt something shift inside her, something she had kept guarded for a long time. It wasn't sudden trust, and it wasn't naive hope, but it was the beginning of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a while. Possibility. As the day moved forward, the edges of their past seemed to soften, making space for something new to take shape. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't simple, but it was real. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story is beginning to touch your heart, stay with it, because what comes next is the part that truly reminds us why second chances matter. Over the following weeks, what started as an unexpected first date slowly turned into something deeper. Armin introduced Saira to Zara, who immediately took a liking to Ayaan in the way only children can, without hesitation, without judgment, simply accepting him as part of her world. There were challenges, of course. Blending two lives, each marked by loss and resilience, wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, fears that resurfaced, and the constant balancing act of protecting their children while opening their hearts. But there was also growth. They learned to lean on each other, to share the weight of responsibilities that once felt overwhelming alone. Slowly, the idea of family began to take on a new meaning, not defined by how it started, but by how it was nurtured. One evening, months later, as they sat together watching Zara and Ayaan play in the fading daylight, Syra realized something she hadn't expected. The life she once thought was broken had quietly begun to heal. And Armin, who had walked into that cafe expecting nothing more than a simple conversation, found himself grateful for a moment that had changed everything. Before we reach the end, here's a special request. If this story resonates with you, comment "Second Chances Matter" to remind others that hope can appear in the most unexpected ways. Because sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings don't come from perfect plans. They come from moments that almost didn't happen. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and engage with the video. Your support helps spread stories like this, stories that remind us that even in the most uncertain moments, kindness can change everything.